thank you to everyone that's joined us today. We wanted to do something a little bit different rather than just death by PowerPoint, because all of us here have had experience of running consultancies and deciding how we're going to run them, whether it's one person, increase in sizes, and we've got some really great speakers. So I'm going to do the speakers first. First of all, you've probably got the details of who I am on the BCS. My name is Consultancy and I'm the founder of Project UPS. We do project management and consultancy, but more about the other people in the room, because I think they're going to be really interesting. So first of all, on my left is Stephen Reeve, and now Stephen is the founder of Entrepreneurial Business School in the UK, and that's the #1 business coaching company in the Asia Pacific region. Now he works with small businesses, small business owners and startups to help them with 9 key areas of the business that everyone should know. Next, Stephen, we have Jessica, who set up her HR consultancy last year, and she was in HR for 14 years in the corporate environment and recruitment. Now she helps businesses of all sizes. She helps them to navigate employment law, subcontracting, employee relations. There's so much stuff to do, and it also provides training to businesses, management and leadership. Next to Jessica, we have Liz, who's a chartered accountant. I've known Liz for a very long time, and in her practice, she's working with small and medium businesses, from startups to groups of companies that are based in the UK and overseas. So she looks after everything from bookkeeping, keeping your business compliant and your taxes optimized, to restructuring, buying and selling businesses. So I think the next one of those events is probably going to be really useful as well. And finally, last but not least, I'm always afraid of Irene, because Dallas & Co solicitors, who are based in Henley and Maidenhead, are commercial lawyers. What she doesn't know about commercial law isn't worth knowing. She's got clients that are local and international, and she particularly enjoys working for SME owner managed businesses, and that like to be valued, and they want to make sure that when you start your business, you do that at the right level. So the first thing to be aware of is this session is really for general information and discussion purposes only. So make notes, and you've got the details on the screen. We are going to share them. Please reach out to everyone. Nothing of this constitutes legal advice. It's general advice, so please write it down. But the speakers are available, and they're going to share their expertise and guidance with you. If you've got any specific questions, it says there, contracts, tax, employment law, anything like that. We've got people in the room, but please reach out to people that you already know as well. But we've got some really excellent speakers here. And as you can see, we're here to make this interesting. Please interact with us. We're going to do some initial words, but then ask as many questions as you have. We're here now to do that for you. Right, so quickly, we're just going to go through the workshops open today, and I'm going to start with running business like a project. So last year, I decided that I was going to refocus my business onto working with more smaller clients rather than some of the large ones. I've worked as a contractor, associate, I've worked directly with businesses. And so when that happened, I thought, well, what's a really good way to do this? I thought, well, I am a project manager, run it like a project. And actually, that's one of the best things I've done, because when you start to think about running your business and all of it's going in your head, when I actually first started, it was because I thought, I know how to do this, I'm just going to do it. And of course, the first thing you're thinking is, oh, what do I need to do next? I know I need an accountant. I think I need some marketing, but maybe not. People were asking me to come and work for them, but I really didn't have anything planned. I didn't really know anything about the laws or the expertise, how I should think about my business going forward. But last year, when I decided to do a bit more of a focus, I thought, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it like a Print2 project, as that's what my organization does. So I decided, well, what's the business case? If I'm going to focus more on the types of companies that I want to work with, let's do the business case. What that actually did for me was slow myself down into rushing into making decisions. I did the numbers. I wrote a very simple business case, which said, if I'm now going to work with smaller clients, say trades, or people that are transitioning out of the M&D, what do I need to do? So that's the reason why when you first start and you think, I've got a really incredible skill, write it down like you would do when you're at work. Create a project. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. When you get to the end, you've actually got something. This does not mean that you have to spend months and months and months doing it, but it actually grounds you into knowing where you want to be. So when we look at the planning for risk, that we've got people here who are going to be able to talk about things like IL-35, late payments, you know, drying up of pipelines. I hadn't even thought about the fact that I needed a sales pipeline because I was thinking I'm going to be a contractor. And so people will know me, maybe they'll ask me. It didn't even occur to me that I should make sure that my LinkedIn profile was online and people would have to call me. Because it was coming, I didn't think about it. And then when I made the switch last year, suddenly thought, how am I going to tell people about me? I don't know what to do. So as I've joined, and you'll see on the final slide of getting clients and who's in your team, you can see, build your project team. That's one of the most important things. Find an accountant. It may be somebody you know, look online, get someone. As I said, we've got some really great experts here in the room. A solicitor. One of the things I thought was, oh, I really love running projects. I'm going to be a partner for Smartsheet. So I think I was one of the first. And luckily, they sent over a contract. Now, I didn't know Irene at the time, but I did know a solicitor who was looking at contracts. And I thought, I'm sure I should get this looked at. I know they're a big company, but I better have a look. And they said, oh, they do love an indemnity, don't they? I didn't even know what that meant, but I did feel good that someone had actually looked at my at the contracts. Things like making sure that you understand what those products and services are that you're going to sell. Because I know that in my case, I was waiting for people to ask me, can you do this? It never occurred to me at the time, maybe I should just be a bit, more focused. I wonder where I would be now, but I think where I am is a lot more knowledgeable about how to help other people. So for those of you that have never thought about running it as a project, give it a go. If you're going to create a new product or service for something that you're doing, some of you have been working in corporate for a long time, and then you decide, well, I've got this special skill, I'd like to go ahead and do it, write it out. So those of you that are in the project management special interest group, you can get loads and loads of free information online. So go online, write the stages, and see what that does for you. The one thing it did for me last year was slow me down. It meant that I wasn't going all over the place and I wasn't wasting time, and it wasn't then stressing me out, which was the first thing. Because when you don't have a pipeline or you don't have a plan, you're constantly thinking, where's this next bit going to come from? What a project allows you to do is think, and it gives you time to think. So with that in mind, it's Project Management 101. Do we have any questions? Any from the room or any online? Either that or I've been very, very good.
Just wondering, as a project, you have the end date, but then if you are planning to set up your business, it's an ongoing and enduring activities.
But you see, you can have stages. So if you say that I would love to have my business up and running in a year, if you are running it, as with Print2, if something changes, you change, because projects are about change. Projects are always about change. So if something changes, what do? You say, well, something's changed in the nature of the people I was going to sell to, or the product I was going to sell. I've run a pilot. This hasn't worked. So if you use the same thought process, You can put a milestone and a timeline, but it doesn't mean you can't change it. Because if you look at a lot of the big projects that people run, they change. So do that yourself. And actually working with a coach or anyone else, so we're going to come on to Stephen, is having a coach means that they can keep you accountable. You don't actually have to run a business at the time to suddenly just then go for a coach. You might say, actually, there's a few of us wanting to do this. Let's find an accountability partner. And it keeps you on track. Because most times when you're, as a project manager, you're working for someone else. Here, you're running it for yourself. And that becomes quite emotional. It's like when you buy a car. If you're buying it or you're buying a house, you're doing it for yourself. So having someone from the outside, just keeping you on track, is a really great idea. So, you know, don't get me wrong. My brother did say to me, are you sure you want to do this? How much have you done so far? That's also good too. So you can absolutely share that experience with other people and change it. That's absolutely fine. Any other questions?
So I was wondering, like, about this context you just mentioned, like, are you going to running it as a sole trader or are you going to register a company?
So mine is already a limited company. That was a decision I made by speaking to an accountant. So when I first set it up, I was thinking maybe I'll be a sole trader, but then I looked at the type of clients I wanted to work with. Many of them were clear that they needed me to be a limited company. So sometimes you'll make the decision based on what you want to do, and sometimes you'll look at the clients that want to speak to you and then speak to someone who's got the right experience. But it was in a way a decision that was made for me. But it was the best decision for me because all the things that I've done later on, again, as part of the project is, had I not done that, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I'm hoping to do with on the LCAS platform with the MOD. They absolutely did need me to do that. So it's all worked up to that. So making that decision will be based on whether you where the types of clients you want. But again, we'll be covering some of that in this session as well. So yes.
Yeah, just in addition to that, so as part of the starting phase or as part of the structure, did you have to consider which SIC or SIC codes to use as part of that? Was that part of the consideration?
Yes, and I think for mine, I'd put in management consultancy. I think there were other ones. I think at the time when I set it up, you didn't have AI or Claude, so it was a lot harder. I didn't really know which ones were there, but now you can say what you're doing and then look at them. But yes, you do that. But also if you want to do things like, say I've got my framework that I'm going to register, so I'm going to put that on I'm going to register that. So for that, I have to consider what part is it, which area. So yeah, I did need to think of SIC. Yeah. So if there are no other questions, I'll actually hand over to Stephen here. So you mentioned that there were 9 key areas that business owners should know about. So what are they?
Thank you. Yeah, business can be overcomplicated when you start thinking about all the things you need to do to run a business. And like if you're sitting in an aircraft cockpit, there's hundreds of switches and buttons and dials, and you can get a bit overwhelmed with it. I see that there's 9 kind of particular areas you need to think about when starting or running a business. And those 9 dials, the first one being inquiries. So inquiries is how good you are at marketing yourself. How good is it you are at getting people to pick up the phone, come to your website, issue you a tender, outreach for some work that might be needed. So really important when you're looking at generating inquiries, how you do that, where is your ideal customer, where do they sit, where do they live, where do they hang out, how are you going to contact them, and understanding your competitive advantage. So that there's something like over 40% of new businesses go out of business ultimately because they didn't understand the target market and if there was enough business in an area. You can walk down a high street and see 10 coffee shops? Will you open another coffee shop in that street? There's things to be thought about in terms of what's your competitive advantage. So what makes you different? And your website should state that and talk about that sort of thing. And any of your messaging should be around why you're different to other people. So think about that when you're marketing. Strike rate is number 2, which is how good you are at sales. Many people think they've got they just need more leads, and invest lots of money in marketing. But actually, when you go and look at it, the challenge is around converting that inbound inquiry to a sale. So how good are you at converting those sales, those leads into sales? So it's something to think about. Scripting is very important. So having a consistent way, if it's just you, or if it's you and other members of a team that you might have, what's the script? How is it that you respond to people? I was working with a kitchen fitting company, and they were average spend was around 25 to 30,000 pounds, and they were just emailing the quotation to people. Whereas actually we encourage them to go and sit and visit and talk to the potential client, and their actually conversion rate went much higher by actually sitting with a person and walking through the quote, where other people were just emailing and just like, oh, well, call me if you have any questions. So things around how you work and how you can increase your strike rate. Customer frequency is another one. So if you're a high frequency, if people come to you a lot, or if it's a low frequency business, someone comes once every so often, just to think about that, how you can increase the frequency. We spend a lot of time trying to attract new businesses to work with us. Whereas actually, if you've got an existing client base, there's a lot of great work and value to be had in taking care of those businesses that you're already working with. So retention and getting them to come back more often. Number 4 is transaction size. So think about how much money people spend with you. So if there's something you're doing really well, there's a chance that that thing can be made a premium service or offering in some way. There's the quickest way of increasing your transaction size, and you can all go home and do it tonight, is just put your prices up. Everyone's always scared of putting their prices up, but actually, have a good look around, understand the market, understand the value of what you're offering. Pricing is a really good one. I've only ever, in a good number of years working with clients where we've put prices up, it's only once we ever had to reverse that price increase because it had a negative impact on profit. We may have lost customers, but the customers we retained were paying more, and we ended up retaining the same level of margin in the business, even though we had less customers, but they're paying more. So you're not working as hard. Number 5 and 6 is around the expenses and cost of goods. So managing your expenses, making sure you focus in those areas to increase profitability, really understand, we call it nickel and diming. So understanding the costs of what it is you're doing and really managing those costs and looking at every cost point. At the moment, there's a big issue with, utility and energy costs and those sort of things that we have to look at. So now's a great time to revisit, contracts and various things that you can do. And then the last 3, one of them is accounts receivable. So if any of you are issuing invoices or charging your clients, I'm sure everyone's charging people for what you do, but getting paid quicker is something that's really important. So there should be someone in your organization, or there should be some time put aside by you, if it's you, to make sure you're chasing the money that's out there. So you shouldn't be a bank for your customers. The money that they owe you should be paid. If your payment terms are 30 days, then make sure you're getting paid within 30 days. So what are the KPIs around that? What are the tasks that sit around that? You send out an invoice, you then chase by email for the next 2 weeks, and then maybe you're phoning, every week, or in the last week every day. So things about getting your money in quicker and making sure there's someone responsible for doing that. So it's an important area that people underestimate. Accounts payable is another one. We get bills. I'm not sure what you're like. I worked with someone, his wife was responsible for paying the bills in the business. And she was one of those lovely people that the minute she got an email or the minute she got a bill in the post, she was paying it straight away. And the bills need to be paid, but they don't have to be paid quite so quickly. So let's just make sure we look at, how soon and how quickly we pay and do that. And the last one, number 9, if anybody holds inventory is a really important one. I usually give the example of Dell. When Michael Dell, it's in his book, he went to look at the inventory days. They buy in all their inventory, they convert that to a computer or whatever they were making. And it was taking about 18 days from when the stuff came in to when it was assembled and sold on. So he went to his management team and said, look, I need that reducing. reduced that by 4 days. They all objected. The management team said it's impossible, it's too much work. They went away, but they achieved it. They got it down by the 4 days. So the next thing he asked, go and reduce it by another 4 days. And ultimately they got it down to 2.5 hours. So Dell is now getting their money back in terms of inventory within 2.5 hours, which is important. Those last 3, accounts receivables, accounts payable and inventory, they're important from a cash flow perspective. The majority of businesses that go out of business because of poor cash flow. You look at the profits you make. I'm sure it's the more seasoned business owners in the room. You look at the profit you make, and then you look at the money that's in your bank. They're 2 very different numbers. So getting the cash for what you do is very important. So those receivables, payables, and inventory is very important. So they're the kind of areas that are quite important for people to work on. And the other couple of, beyond that are processes, so efficiency, so processes and systemization is very important. And people is another big one in terms of team. Anyone know the average age of a McDonald's worker in the UK? Anyone know that?
18, 16?
17, 18, yeah. Average age of a McDonald's manager? Anyone know that? It's low 20s. Average revenue of a McDonald's restaurant is about £3 million. So that's a highly systemized business with very well managed teams. So you've got 16 to 21-year-olds running a £3 million business because they're highly systemized and have got all of those things in place. So that's the importance of having all of these 9 areas in play to understand what those numbers are of those 9 things, and then working in processes, systemization and teams are very important. Any questions on any of that from anyone?
How do you identify customers? How do you find the right customer for you?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, well, yeah, depending on where, I mean, you'll have an idea from when you're going into business, the type of people. We do a big thing. We're big on testing and measuring. So there's a thing called 10 by 10, the 10 by 10% marketing strategy. And it's a theory, and it's a theory because I've never met anyone who has 10 strategies. The theory is you get 10 different marketing strategies, each of which bring you 10% of your clients or your leads. No one I've met has ever had the full 10, but it's doing whatever it is you need to do. So do you advertise through LinkedIn? Do you do some social media? Do you have a storefront? Do you do billboards? But test and measure. I love it when I go to any business and they ask me, how did I find out about them? You shop online or you do something and you'll be asked in a little survey afterwards, how did you find out about us? I love that because that's testing and measuring the marketing. They know where you've come from and how you've come to be with them. So test and measure is a big one. Try a few different things to understand what's the best effect and where you're getting the people coming through. Okay. Yes, sir.
Regarding retainer, are most of your clients or customers quite welcome to that, having a retainer?
Say again, sorry.
Because on the board regarding pricing, you had something
pricing,
about
yeah.
Retainer, know your pricing more the day rate, project
right.
Being retainer.
Yeah.
So regarding retainer, are most of your clients or customers more accepted to it to have a retainer?
Yeah, there's a good number who, yeah, the retainer is a good model. The other one is outcome based pricing, master service agreements with KPIs, with accelerators and various things that sit in there. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the reason I asked that, because I can assume some customers may find that as a challenge to.
Can be, yes. Yeah. You've got to understand that it's not the same pricing for all necessarily. It'll be depending on the client themselves and the nature of the work. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, actually, I was wondering how to find a right business partner.
Right.
Because now I've been working as a sole trader. Like what you said, all the works I do it by myself.
Yes.
I feel it's so busy.
Yes.
Apart from normal work.
Right.
I'm just wondering how to find the right person to work with.
Is that a partner in terms of financial backing or an advisory capacity to support you and help with some tasks?
I think, if I can find someone who would love to run a business with me, then I would love to register a company.
Right.
You should probably look for a staff member, first of all, frankly, somebody that you can work with. Employing somebody is a good way of doing that. Then you can find out if you've got synergy.
Yeah, maybe employing someone who works with you, some kind of subcontract partnership arrangement. There could be a third party that you work with who then gets to know you and the business you work together, that then you can build a bigger relationship. But probably there's pros and cons of just finding someone and going into partnership with them, because there's somewhat of an unknown quantity, the person that you're working with, unless they've got a bit of a track record and someone you know. But by doing some work with them and then developing that relationship, evolving that to then maybe someone that can help a bit more.
So maybe we can pick up on some of those questions afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yes,
explore
absolutely,
who
yes.
you're talking about. I think that'd be quite
Sure,
interesting.
sure.
Yeah.
There's so many
great.
different ways.
Yeah.
So Stephen, how do you build your reputation? Do you get your contracts business through word of mouth, or you advertise yourself, or you have a marketing agent?
Yeah, referrals is a huge
Or
one.
referral?
Referrals, because you've already worked with someone who will then recommend you.
Yeah, word of mouth.
Word of mouth is a big one, but obviously that it comes down to that 10 by 10 I talked about of, where your people live, what's the ICP, what's the ideal customer profile of the type of person you want to work with. When you understand that, there's something called the 10-minute marketing plan. Actually, I'll probably share that to everybody after this and the folks online as well. It's a really good quick document to look at, and it makes you just sit back and think, who am I as a business? What's the personality of my business? What's my why? And where am I different, and where do my customers live, and how much money do I must spend, and where, all those sort of things. There's a nice little document that I'll share with everybody that's a really good document to start to think about, where do I find the businesses that I can work with.
Any other questions? Any online?
So you were talking about the credit period of the customers, right?
The
Credit period.
credit period?
Can you
Yes,
avoid
yeah,
the
that's
credit
right. Yeah,
period?
for the receivables, yeah, payment
Most of the
terms.
times, like, what exactly happening, like the customer has the right to determine what the credit period is. So how do you minimize that credit period? So what sort of strategy that we have to use in order to minimize the credit period from the customer?
Yeah, sure. You want to?
Yeah, so I had an experience where a very large corporate sent me a contract and said, it's 60 days to pay.
Yeah.
And I wrote back
Yeah.
and said, I'm a one-person business and it's too long. I'd like it to be 30, please. Yeah. So they changed it. Sometimes you don't know. You can ask the question.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask the question.
Right.
I did, because I thought, I'm not doing 60 days. Thanks very much. And sometimes what can happen is you do a contract with someone. It's my experience again, is that they said, I won't give you any money until I've been paid. Because that can happen sometimes. And I said, no, if you don't get paid, I'm very sorry, you're not going to get paid, but I'm going to get paid on time. So that's the only way I'm going to contract with you. But what I did was, because I knew the individual, I extended it to something like 45 days to give them the ability to get the payment back. But that was my own literal experience, that sometimes you feel as a smaller business, you can't ask, but actually you can and you should, because if you don't ask, you don't get. So
you can also put in late payment penalties. There's things that you can.
One of the strategies that I used in my practice, so when they said that 45 days is credit period, so I already offered them a discount when they pay on time, but the discount is removed when they said the 45 days.
That's good.
Then they automatically comes back to the original timelines.
Just be careful with discounting.
Sometimes, sometimes works, sometimes not work.
Be careful with discounting.
Yes,
so there's a whole discussion I can do on discounting, but no, it's something you can do. And look, I mean, the government today announced there's some new protection for small businesses around late payments. So that go and look. There was some announcements today by the government in terms of supporting small businesses when you get poor payments. And another thing, if you're contracting with larger businesses where there's larger numbers involved that may be risky for you as an individual, there's options of outsourcing the payments. You can actually work with other institutions and they can do the invoicing on your behalf. They'll be responsible for collecting and they'll pay you the money up front with obviously a small deduction, but that can help with cash flow. And when there's larger contracts you may not traditionally have gone for, because it's kind of a little bit, larger than you'd be comfortable with, but there's other options there that you can look into. Okay. Yes, so now for Jessica. So I touched on the area of team. Team's an important one. You may be just on your own at the moment, but you may need to then, look at hiring other people. But I guess my question is, do you have to have team and people in your business to then engage with an HR professional like yourself?
Not necessarily. So some of the clients that I work with are looking to hire and they need to hire for, capacity reasons. And they don't know whether to hire an employee or whether to get somebody on a self-employed basis or a contractor basis. And some of the things that I say is it depends very much on your cash flow and what that looks like, and whether you can reliably afford to take on an employee who you need to pay reliably each month. So sometimes taking on a contractor or a subcontractor is the best way rather than an employee. But in terms of hiring subcontractors, I help them with knowing what steps to take and how to engage a subcontractor, because they need to put things in place like subcontractor agreements or contract for services to demonstrate to HMRC that somebody is genuinely self-employed and they're not actually an employee in disguise. Some of the clients that I work with, they have an impression that, oh, well, that person's self-employed. But when you actually look at the reality of the situation, this person is very much an employee. So it's looking at things such as control. So does the client control when the worker is in? Are they saying they work these hours, or that they need to request time off or request holiday? Those are things that are very much employee focused rather than self-employed. The right of substitution. So can a client, or does the contractor have the right to send somebody else to do the work if they can't do it themselves, or is the client being insistent that it needs to be that person? If they don't have the right of substitution, that very much reads like the person is an employee rather than being genuinely self-employed. And then the third area is the mutuality of obligation. So is the client obliged to offer the subcontractor work, and is the subcontractor obliged to accept the work? Is it project-based, or is it much more like an employment relationship? So all three of those factors need to point to genuine independent contracting to be outside of IR35. IR35 determines whether PAYE tax is paid at source or whether you retain the tax efficiency of operating through a limited company. So in the world of HR, we're always saying to document everything. So in terms of documenting, before every engagement, if you're a contractor and you're going on engagement with a client, run the check for employment status tool. Employment status for tax, sorry, not the employment status tool, with every engagement, because the work you do with one client might be outside IR35 and the work you do with another might fall within IR35. So using that tool can help you determine whether it's, whether you fall within or whether you are outside of it. And keep a record of that determination as well, because that helps to form the evidence with HMRC as to whether you're correctly positioned or not, and that forms part of your evidence trail. So I'll pause there for a second because I feel like I've said a lot. Are there any questions regarding what I've just said before I move on to the next part?
Yes, regarding the determination, so the question that comes to mind, how about if the client has already determined whether it's inside or outside IR35, do you still need to use the tool?
So yes, because when the client is a small business, it's up to the contractor to determine whether they're inside or outside of IR35. So if you're a contractor, you should use the tool for your own determination, and then you keep a record of the test as your evidence. But I think the most important thing is having a contract for services or with your client that outlines exactly how you work, and then making sure that that's actually the reality as well, and that you're not operating as like I said, as an employee in disguise.
Okay, because the reason I ask is better when you're looking for your next pipeline of job and you see something, but then it's got inside IR35. So that's where the kind of the question is going when it's already predetermined by the client. Yeah,
that's it. I think. Are you talking about then as you're operating as more of a sole trader rather than a limited? Well, because you can be inside IR35 as a limited company as well, and that's part of the confusion, isn't it? Yeah. So
the umbrella company.
Yes. Yeah. So and then, sorry, go on.
So if you start working for an agency and it's deemed to be outside of IR35.
Yeah.
So that's the mode you're working. Then you engagement finishes 3 months or whatever, and then 6 months later, the client gets assessed. And HMRC says, no, we're not satisfied that it actually was outside of 35. Who's liable? Are you as a contractor ever liable for judgment that happens, with your client that deems it as being within IR35 when you started on the assumption it was outside of it? So you've got nothing to worry about. Once you've signed up and started working, is that it for you? Or do you need to be very much conscious of it could change in the future and you could get a tax bill that you were not expecting?
I think it's a difficult question to answer because it's like anything with HR and with legalities, that every situation is different. And there's always these, different nuances dependent on the situation. But I think the responsibility doesn't stop with the contract piece and with the, when you're initially engaging, you need to be operating as that, looking at those 3 areas of the right of substitution, the mutuality of obligation, the control. How you're actually working in practice will determine that you actually are outside of IR35 rather than what it says on paper sometimes, because sometimes it can say something on paper, but how you're operating is very different, and then that changes things in that regard.
I can give an example. So recently I was doing some work in a central government department, and it was through being a consultant through a prime contractor, for want of a better word. So they had the contract, and I've now done work with them twice. But each time I took the questionnaire, it comes through and they make a judgment. Now, how you answer it, when you go in and you speak with them, that was the first thing I did, was how am I going to actually be working? And I looked at the contract, then I actually completed the questionnaire that came through. And that was a third party that comes through to you, you sign it, and it gives you an evaluation. So I couldn't believe it, but the fact that I had my own office gave me bigger points. One of the things I know that I purposely make sure I'm working for more than one client at any one time. Because for me, if I'm solely working for them all the time, 100%, then it feels like I'm an employee because I'm not working.
Yes.
So, and because I'd worked with local government, the scary IR35 had been there so many years before it became public that I was already aware that if I'm working for someone full time, that sort of feels like a full-time job. So I might be liable. Whereas if I've got multiple clients, then actually, no, I'm not. And I'm looking at the outcome base. So understanding that and not even realizing that I decided to have an office, that made a difference, because it felt, oh, you're not just working from home, you actually have an office. It was so, but I would say for your own benefit, have a look.
It's things as well, like providing your own equipment, your own tools, your own, products and all that sort of thing. Really, having your own assets helps as well. I would say that's a big thing that comes up. Some of the trades and construction world, it's having their own tools and their own uniforms and things really does make a difference. I would say so. Any other questions?
Jessica, want to ask you, what's your view about internship, the related HR rule? Would the interns, trainees consider to be an FTE or fixed term contractors?
It depends. It depends on what the business
Internship.
wants to do, and it depends on the internship. I mean, it used to be the case that they weren't even paid sometimes, and now obviously that's changed, which I think is great because that's important. So it very much depends on the business and on the on the individual, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great when they take them on as an employee, because then they can you know, develop them and nurture them into then full-time employees later on, once they finish their, you know, once they finished at school and that sort of thing, like university. So yeah, I think it's a great thing that they do to give that opportunity to, you know, the younger generation, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, say, when I first started, right, I may only have one main client, and it might just be myself. So when it comes to the substitution test, like, does that ultimately make me within the IR35 or?
Not necessarily. So I have a business partner, but I've just taken, in the process of taking somebody on. But I'm also, and I'm a limited company. So with my rights of substitution, it's a subcontractor, as an example. So that can be a way, if you contract that work to somebody else, then that is effectively your right of substitution. So you can do it that way.
Right.
Yeah, as an idea. Any other questions?
Any online?
Any online?
No.
Are we doing time?
Yeah, we've got time.
Okay. So do you want to move on?
Yeah, or I was going to ask you some
Go ahead.
interesting HR questions. So
Sure.
the thing that I think I'm wanting to do is to take on new members of staff, and I have no idea how I would really do that. I see people who are who have businesses, who do job descriptions and things like that. Is that I mean, I'm guessing a HR expert like yourself knows exactly how to write a job description, because when it's so personal, it's really difficult to know how to do. So how would you go about saying to me, this is how you would do a job description? What do I need to do?
I think it's about, and this is something that I do with my clients sometimes, particularly when, you know, they've got a few people in the team already, as an example, and the work, everyone's doing everything. There's no clear division of labour. There's no clear delegation of you know, different roles. So we use it as a way of looking at, okay, who should be responsible for what, and that comes under the tasks piece, the duties, the tasks, and then you would look at what are the skills that we need for to be able to you know, to carry out this part of the job. What does that look like, and what are the kind of competencies? So I worked in corporate for, as you said, a number of years, and we had a corn ferry, which was a you know, a method of defining competencies, and that's just one way of doing it. But essentially, it is, you know, looking at what makes somebody successful in this role, and what are we really looking for from this person in terms of skills, but also in personality and attributes. And I think it's also about hiring for values as well. So looking at, you know, what are the values that we need to see in this person. And I think it's becoming more challenging as well, with in terms of the new legislation changes that are happening next year, where unfair dismissal rights will go from 2 years to 6 months. So hiring and having a very clear job description and a really good understanding of what you're looking for is going to be absolutely crucial in making sure that whoever you take on is a good fit for the business.
And I think that's the thing that's worried me the most, is where I was thinking I would like to employ someone. Now I've heard about the legislation changes and I don't understand them enough. I'm thinking, oh, should I do this? And because you always think about the worst case scenario.
Yes.
And yet if you were employed, when I was employed, I was a really good employee. So why am I thinking that? And maybe it's just what you hear online. So what is the thing that's worrying people the most when they're coming to you about these employment right changes, and the people want to scale? What's happening?
I think it's they're overwhelmed with the number of changes, because there are quite a few, because obviously you've got statutory sick pay from day one from next month. The parental leave rights are now all from day one. And from January 2027, the unfair dismissal reform in terms of moving, like I said, from that 2 years to 6 months. But then there are also 0-hour contract changes affecting the hospitality industry massively, because people are going to have the right to request guaranteed hours based on the hours they work. Now, that's great in one sense because it does promote the principle of fairness, which is important. People should be treated fairly. But on the other hand, it's going to be challenging for business owners to keep up with those changes. So I think it's the overwhelm with the sheer number of different changes that are happening. So, you know, and I think my advice would be just keep it simple, focus on each area, you know, one at a time, and kind of work through it, get an understanding of how your business actually operates in practice, do a bit of an audit on these things and sort of see. But, you know, I'm helping the clients as much as I can to navigate those challenges and changes.
And Stephen, did you find that you've got similar things coming up?
Oh, big questions being asked, and one of the big areas is onboarding. So especially with that regulation change coming in with that 6 months, the onboarding becomes critically important. So when we talk about onboarding with smaller businesses, we actually say you're adopting an employee like it's a family member, because they'll be absolutely critical to the well-being of the business and the happiness in the business. And so you've got to adopt and really take care of the new staff and onboard them properly and make that really clear, because that'll help in terms of assessing if there's claims or anything like that. You've got to have a very clear onboarding process, which a lot of organisations don't have, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely essential. And I think actually, you know, the people in your business, they are the asset of the business. The business doesn't run without them. So ultimately it's, you know, it's treat your people well and treat them fairly, and then they will do a good job for your clients. And I think that's really key.
And I think out of all the policies, we've got IT policies, etc. I guess the HR policies that you help provide are probably going to be critical, that they must be in place for me before I even start looking, because if I don't know what the rules are, might end up doing the wrong thing. So that's how you guys can help.
I think there can be a lot in terms of policy documents, and I think my whole mantra is don't overcomplicate it. Let's keep it simple. I think for a startup business, it's just focusing on those core policies that you absolutely need, and then the other ones that are more of a kind of not a luxury, but as your business grows, you're more likely to need those. But as long as those core foundation policies are in place for a small business, that tends to be where we start from.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
If there is time.
Yeah, we absolutely have time. Yeah.
So on the slide where it talks about protect your status, is that something in collaboration with HR professional like yourself, or a solicitor, or is that a combination?
I would say, I mean, it's certainly something that we can help with. It depends on what you mean by can you explain a little bit further?
It says document working in every writing, ensure contracts match real practices. So
yes.
Is that something, for example, I do by myself, or I need to work with an HR professional or a solicitor to help?
I think it would be, you can, we'll connect after and you can reach out. And I think if you've ever got questions like that, more than happy, of course, to answer and have a look at it. I think it depends. If you get into a dispute, then obviously that's more of a solicitor piece, depending on how severe it is. But yeah, I think in terms of the documenting, it's running that check and then keeping a record of the check, keep a record of the contract, going with your eyes wide open about how you're operating and how you're working.
The regulations are changing so quickly that you need someone who really understands that specialism to work with. And we can spend a week researching and using AI maybe to do something, whereas someone like Jessica's got all the documents right there and just a little bit of revision. But
because AI is not always accurate. Sometimes it does this thing, like they call it hallucinating, which I find hilarious. But yeah, so you don't always get the answers you need when you do it yourself. So yeah. Okay, so Liz, we've talked a lot about the CEST tool. What are the pros and cons of using that tool from your perspective?
So from an accountancy perspective, the CES tool is a good starting point. But at the end of the day, HMRC can and will use that tool against you if the reality of the situation doesn't match the criteria, the answers to the questions that you put into the tool at the outset. So if the reality of how you're actually operating is not the same as the way in which you put those questions, that you put those answers in, then the CEST tool is really of no use to you. You haven't got a leg to stand on. So it's really important when you're answering that questionnaire at the start of your contract to make sure that you understand, as Panima said, ask questions of your contractor. You know, what does this mean? How am I going to be working before you rely on something like that? We had a couple of questions earlier about being a sole trader or being a limited company. Your business structure is really important. In some situations, you don't have a choice. So, you know, IR35, you're going into an employee type relationship. A lot of large companies won't take you on as a sole trader because they don't want the national insurance exposure by getting it wrong, the employer's national insurance exposure and all the other penalties that come with it. So in a lot of cases, you don't have that choice. But the other thing about being a sole trader is we've got Making Tax Digital starting on the 6th of April. And anyone with turnover from trade of over £50,000 is going to now have to submit a return every quarter. You've got to keep your accounting records on bookkeeping software that HMRC will be able to have access to the transactions to verify. You've got to do a return every quarter. You've also got to do your tax return every year as well. So the amount of compliance work, admin work is going to increase. Next year, that limit goes from 50,000 down to 30,000. From the year after, it goes down to 20,000. So we've got a lot more legislation coming in, a lot more compliance coming in. So being a sole trader may not be the be all and end all that it has been. Limited companies, on the other hand, they're not going to introduce MTD. We thought they might. We've had MTD on the cards since about 2018. It's finally coming into place now. And last year they announced that MTD for limited companies is not on the cards for the foreseeable future, i.e. the length of this government. So, or this current term of government. So being a limited company, you've got one tax return each year in terms of the corporation tax return. Like a sole trader, you might have VAT returns as well if you're more than £90,000 in turnover. With being in the contracting sphere, there is a flat rate available, but it depends on the level of your purchases as to whether that flat rate is advantageous to you or not. But your accountant will be able to tell you which is the best scheme for you to be on in terms of VAT compliance. So VAT is important. The tax regime that you're sitting in is important, and the tax regime, whether you're a sole trader or a limited company, also has a different tax treatment in terms of expenses. So, for example, for a sole trader, the expense has to be wholly and exclusively for the purpose of the business. For an employee to claim against their business, it has to be wholly, exclusively and necessarily incurred for the purpose of the business. So slightly different tests. As a sole trader, you can claim things like use of home allowances. In a limited company, you can claim rent against your company if you've got a rental agreement in place with your company. The rules regarding travel expenses are also different. If you're working and going to the same place of work on a regular basis, that's commuting costs, it's not travel costs. So the cost of actually getting to the place of work before you start work is not allowable for tax. You might think it should be, but it's not. So there's lots of different rules depending on whether you're a sole trader or a limited company. And it's about looking at your personal position and looking at what you're trying to achieve. Do you want, for example, to have longevity in your business? Are you looking to sell it at the end? Is it something that's scalable? In which case, being a sole trader is not as marketable as being a limited company. Systemizing your business is really important as well, because if you've got a systemized business, it will sell for more than an unsystemized business, because you are not the business. The processes and your limited company are a standalone unit. It's also really important to know your figures, know your numbers, and a good accountant can help you with that. A lot of softwares, Xero, for example, have just introduced AI and some analytic tools in there where you can see and drill down as to how you're doing. You can benchmark your figures against other people in the same industry to see how you compare, whether you're in the top 25%, bottom 25%, middle sector. So things like knowing what your figures are is really, really important. Now, that might be as simple as looking at what money is coming in and can I have a budgeting system? You don't have to have formal budgets. I'm an accountant, I'm saying you don't have to have formal budgets, right? What you can do is you can turn your accounting equation. We're always taught as accountants, sales minus expenses equals profit. But why should you be the last person to get paid? You don't go into business to be the last person to get paid, yeah? You go into business because you want to make an income, you want to provide for your families, you want to achieve a lifestyle that you want. So if we turn that accounting equation around and call it sales minus profit equals expenses, now what you've got left is your budget. And you can only spend according to what you've got coming in, because if you haven't got money coming in, then you're overspending, and that's not a good way to run your business. So what you can do is you can set up little pots. And in our business, we do this every month. Twice a month, I go in, I look at what money is coming into my business. I put 20% straight away into the tax account. It's in a different bank. I can't get to it easily. Means I can't spend it. Yeah. I put 20% into salaries fund or whatever percentage it is that month. I put that away. So I know the staff are going to get paid. I know the payroll is covered. I know the PAYE taxes are going to get paid. I'm not going to lose sleep at night that the taxman's not going to be paid and knocking at my door. So make sure you've got your tax put aside. You have a rainy day fund. If things go well, if I want to buy an extra piece of equipment, I've got a fund that I can do that with. I've got my operating expenses fund. I know what my standing orders are going to be. I try and pay everything by standing order. So I've got a flat rate. I actually charge my clients on a subscription basis so that I know what's coming in. They know what's going out. And I've got a budget. Yeah. So knowing your figures, making your figures work for you means you don't have to spend so much time looking at the figures. You know what they are. You know you've got a system in place. You can run your business quite easily. Talked about systemization, deadlines, making sure having that pot of money on one side is really important for making sure that you meet your tax deadlines. We're getting into a situation, it will happen with making tax digital for self-assessment. We've already got it for VAT. If you are late filing your VAT returns or your self-assessment, your MTD returns, you will get penalised. You're allowed 4 points, a bit like a driving licence. 4 times late, you're going to get a £200 penalty. Yeah, you've then got to be good for 12 months to start turning things around. Don't get into that situation in the first place. If you're going to be self-employed, then don't forget that in your first period of being self-employed, you'll pay your tax based on the year to the 5th of April, but you'll pay it the following January. If you've got a short period, you might not have a payment on account, but if you've got a longer period, you could end up paying the equivalent of 1.5 years worth of tax in one go, the January after your first year of trading. And if you haven't saved for that, that can have a huge impact on your business. So talking to your accountant, understanding when your tax bills are going to hit, what are your deadlines, what can you claim for, is going to help you to run your business more effectively. Have those systems in place. Have the conversations with your accountant. Your accountant is not there just to charge you fees. Yeah, your accountant is there to help. Your accountant can signpost you. Your accountant can help you to save money and optimize your tax position. Now, if you're in the IR35 position, you're not going to be able to pay yourself dividends because all of your money is taken out through PAYE, because that's the way the IR35 system works. But if you are in the position where you can pay dividends, then you might want to look at paying yourself a low salary and high dividends. So there are ways and means of optimizing. There are other things you can do, like trivial benefits. You can pay yourself and your staff, you can make payments of up to £50 at a time in the form of vouchers, for example, not as a reward for work, but maybe for a birthday present or a Christmas present. Directors are capped at £300. But if you're not using those allowances and you're not aware of them, then you're wasting them. And with a lot of our UK tax system, it's a case of use it or lose it. Our personal allowances don't run over. We lose them if we haven't used them by next week. Your pension allowances don't run over. Your capital gains tax allowances don't run over. You need to be tax efficient. You need to be talking to your accountant. Have a pre-year end meeting. Work out how you can optimise your tax. Work out if you need to buy your equipment before the year end or after the year end so that you can time your capital allowances. If you're buying a car, for example, if you're buying an electric car, yes, you're going to get a huge tax saving in year one, but year two, you won't have paid your personal, you won't have paid your payment on account. You are storing up a tax payment in 18 months' time. And a lot of people forget about that. So you need to be planning ahead. You need to be working out what your cash flows and know your numbers.
Any questions?
Covered a lot there.
I probably have a question.
Yes.
About the sole trader and also like whether to set up a limited company as well. I know you mentioned like quite a couple of points and then like there are pros and cons and depending.
Yeah.
Would it be a must that like when I want to first set up my company, do I really need to decide at the first beginning whether sole trader, limited, or I set up limited first and then at the end I know a sole trader might work better?
People tend to start, if they're going that way, they'll tend to start as a sole trader and then incorporate later on. But you should always be reviewing your setup. So don't assume that the structure you had 5 years ago is still relevant today. Do review it on a regular basis. It might mean that you might form a partnership or a limited liability partnership, for example. There are other structures available other than just sole trade or limited company, and they have different purposes and different outcomes. So what suits you 5 years ago, what suits you at the beginning, doesn't necessarily suit you later on. So for example, the sole trader, you'll start to pay higher rates of tax at £50,000 worth of turnover. You don't pay similar rates of tax. Well, you don't pay similar rates of tax as a limited company. The rate of corporation tax starts at 19%, goes up to 25%. The rates of income tax start at 20% and go up to 45%. I know what rate of tax I prefer to pay.
So there's no benefits to be a sole trader anymore.
No, there are. There are benefits to be a sole trader. You can so as a sole trader, you can still sort of claim pension contributions. You've got a bit more freedom in terms of your expenses. You're not governed by sort of rules on taking money out, running payrolls, for example. You can take the money out of the business as a sole trader when you want to. You're going to pay the tax at the end of the year. Whereas if you take the money out as an employee, you've got to pay payroll tax, or it's got to be declared as a dividend.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. As a sole trader, you're taxed on the profit that you earn in the business. In a company, the company is taxed on the profit it earns, but you're only taxed when you take that money out of the company. So you can actually play the tax rates. If you don't need income, you can keep it rolling up in the company and not take it out until a later date.
Then eventually we still need to subject to tax.
Yeah, at some point.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah, but it's if you're in the position where you can choose what tax rate to pay, it gives you a bit more flexibility.
Okay. It's just this MDT thing.
And that's why get yourself a good accountant.
And bookkeeping.
And bookkeeping, yes.
Yeah. Question. We have in the same aspect difference in terms of debt between sole traders and limited companies. I understand that if you have more debt, it's like a tax shield, right? So is this does it work the same for sole traders than for limited companies?
Not especially.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm more than happy to talk separately on circumstances, but I can't generalise on that situation because it depends. It's a bit like asking how long is a piece of string sort of thing. Yeah, it depends is the answer.
So I'm not sure if I got this right, but as a sole trader, aren't you personally liable?
Absolutely.
So it's down to you, right? So if anything goes wrong, it's your house at stake.
Absolutely.
Whereas if it's a limited company, it's another entity. So you could,
It's
if you had to.
It is a separate person, but
So
if
you've
you
got protection, right?
if you've
So-
given personal guarantees, for example,
Yeah.
on a loan, you lose the limited
But now,
liability.
in the IT industry, there could be something
Yes.
happen. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
It's your fault for making
Yeah.
a recommendation or doing something.
Yeah.
And someone decides to come after you as a sole trader.
Yeah. Yeah. You are personally liable for the debts of the business.
That's still the case. That was always a worry in the past that you're personally.
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
Okay, so
I think that's having the right insurance in
Yes,
place.
you can
Yeah.
insure,
Yeah.
but obviously Irene will talk to that.
And at which point?
At which
Just-
point, yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
So Irene, sort of at what stage should the lawyer be involved in a business?
Well, obviously, I would say right at the beginning. but I know that many young businesses, they know exactly what they should do, but they don't have much cash, so they make a list of what they think they should absolutely do, and they'll kick the things that they can't afford to do a little bit down the line and come back to that later. Unfortunately, that quite often means that by the time they come back to whatever it is they should have done in the first place, they've got a problem. And so the shape of what they then need is completely different. And the shape of what they then need will also generally cost much more, because what we're trying to do is put something in place that should have been there and fix the problem not having it has caused. So an example of that, and I don't know if any of you are in business with other people yet, but if you're starting a business, at some point in time, you may want to bring somebody into that business. I suggest it from my business experience as an employee rather than a business partner. But if you get as far as bringing in somebody as a partner and probably a shareholder in the business, very many people come to us as shareholders in a business when they've fallen out. And bringing somebody into your business without agreeing the parameters of that relationship at the beginning is a bit like getting married. You're getting married, but the law and what happens to your assets when you split up from a marital relationship is actually quite clear. The law of what happens to your business if you as shareholders split up is also quite clear, but it's very disadvantageous to you as a shareholder. So, example, we get a lot of work from family lawyers who send clients to us where we have a husband and wife in business. In fact, when clients say to me, why do we need a shareholders agreement? I know my shareholder, we're best friends, or I know my shareholder, we're brother or sister. But my favourite one is, I know the shareholder, it's my husband or wife. And I say to them, well, what could possibly go wrong? And to put together a shareholders agreement costs about £1,200. To sort out a shareholders dispute between a husband and wife can cost anything up to £45,000–50,000, because you're fighting over assets that you both think that you want to keep and you both want control over it. And one of the principal areas and one of the principal reasons you need a shareholders agreement is that and people do fall out, where there's money involved, money and blood, people fall out. It's unavoidable. So the best you can do is have a good roadmap in place for what happens. And we often get calls from clients who said, I had one last year from somebody who's become a friend who I know through business, who was in a partnership with a very good friend of hers. And the very good friend had decided that she wanted to leave the business and retire, and asked my client, she was called Kathy, do you want to buy my shares in the business? This is the price. And Kathy couldn't afford to buy the shares at that price. So her erstwhile best friend said, well, I'm going to sell them to somebody else then. And Kathy phoned me and said, can she do that? And I said, do you have a shareholders agreement? And she said, oh, yes, definitely. I said, okay, well, providing an idiot didn't draft it, it will probably provide in there that she can only sell to somebody outside the business when she's asked you if you want to buy them. Anyway, I said, send it through to me. So she sent me through the certificate of incorporation from the company's house, which is obviously not a shareholders agreement. But a lot of people think because it says on company's house who the shareholders are, that's all you need. And they spend about £25,000 sorting that out so that she could get herself into a position that she could afford to buy her friend out of the business. There's nothing in the Companies Law Act that requires her friend to offer those shares to anybody else. So that's I think, to my mind, that's the principal reason of ensuring that you have a roadmap in place for what happens when you split up. It also will deal with things like death. It will deal with things like if your co-shareholder wants to go and set up a competing business, how can you regulate that? How can you protect your business? I think what I would say to you is all of the time in business, you have to think about what you can do to protect what you've started and protect what you're growing. And that's a very good way of doing it. The other area people get into trouble with is they haven't protected their brand, they haven't protected their IP. That's really a very simple thing to do. And frankly, anyone with half a brain can do that by themselves. You don't need to pay legal fees to do it. You can go on the government's website, select what you think your business type is, and get your trademark registered, even if it's your own name. It's a thing, if you don't register that as a trademark, there's nothing to stop somebody else setting up a company with a very, very similar but tiny bit different of a name. And you'll then have to have a fight about protecting the name that you have worked hard to build up and the brand that you've tried to build up and gain recognition for. So that's how you deal with the relation. So I always say to people, when you're setting up a business, you need to look after the relationships with people in your business, who you're growing your business with. But you also need to look after the relationships you have with third parties. So as Praneem said, very often the small business, when they're presented with a contract from a larger corporate, think that it's an absolutely done deal and they have no choice. And in truth, it does depend on your bargaining position. It depends how much that big corporate wants you. You might have to accept everything that's in it, you just might, but it is certainly always worth asking. But it's also worth asking a lawyer if there are red flags in that agreement. Are there things in that agreement that are absolutely disastrous for your business? And we often get clients who come to us and say, look, we knew we're going to have to sign this, but how can we protect ourselves? Or is there something in this that you would say, absolutely don't do it? And it may be that I will say to them, absolutely don't do it, but they'll decide to do it anyway because the contract is so valuable to them, the client is so valuable to them that they'll do it. But then they can make a decision about, is that a risk that's insurable? And then manage the risk in that way, or just be prepared for what that risk might be and try to avoid tripping up. I think on the slide, which I can't see, that mentions limiting your liability. There is no need for you to be liable for absolutely everything you do for somebody. Have a look and see what the limitation of liability provision says in your contract. And on that subject, clients very often come to us and say, oh look, we've got a contract, we've drafted it using, sometimes they now admit to using AI because it's so glaringly obvious. And I say to them, well, probably what's in the contract is absolutely fine, but what you wouldn't know is what isn't in it. And that's one of the things that people often do not spot, that there isn't a limitation of liability in the provision. And your liability can be limited contractually in a number of ways, not just the value of what you're liable for, but the period of time for which you're liable. Contractually, you're liable for a contractual claim for 6 years after the date of a breach. And that might mean that you have an allegation of breach against you for the way in which you performed your service. You don't want that liability sitting around for 6 years. So you should look at negotiating a cap on that liability, both in terms of the period of time and also in terms of the duration for which that liability, and that will lower your insurance for that liability. If you can say to your insurers, well, you're not liable for a full 6 years, maybe it's just 2, and the liability is limited to your cap, again, that will help you get insurance at a cost-effective rate. What else are you going to think about?
I was going to say that you mentioned that shareholder agreement of that person that wanted to sell those shares. That really reminded me of, I'm sure it was Brad and Angelina, where she sold the winery or something, and he didn't have a choice. And I think it's because they didn't have an agreement and they didn't speak to Irene about it, which is obviously what they should have done.
With husbands and wives, it's not uncommon, I'm just going to sound sexist, but it's nearly always the case that the wife has been given shares in the business because the husband has kindly made her a shareholder because he thinks that that's something he has to do so that he can, well, he does have to do that to pay her dividends, I presume. but he'll do that, and also or to pay her a salary under the national insurance threshold, for which she doesn't have to be a shareholder. But he'll do that. And then, in fact, the case that I just spoke about, where the client paid over 45,000, that's exactly what happened. It was an independent financial advisor, very valuable business. Wife knew absolutely nothing about the business, did absolutely nothing in the business. We'd given her 50% of the shares, and she fought tooth and nail for them when they were divorcing. And he didn't really have an answer to that. There isn't an answer to that. She's a shareholder. So, so that's something we see a lot in small businesses. So be careful who you go into business with, be careful who your shareholder is, but make sure that you regulate it, and not just on Companies House. You'll know when I say to people, have you got a shareholders agreement, and they say they don't know, I say, did you instruct a lawyer and did you pay for it? And if the answer is no, then I know they don't have a shareholders agreement. So I'm a sole trader. I've had my business for nearly 25 years. And I employ 8 people. I don't yet have a business partner, because I've always said that, having been a partner in a law firm, I didn't want to be anybody's partner ever again, in any sense of the word, frankly. But I'm getting to the stage where I will have to do that to make sure that I've got a business that will succeed me. And I do happily have somebody in the business that from whom there's real potential for that, but he's worked for me for 3 years. So I know him inside out and back to front, which is why I suggested you employ someone to decide if you want to take them into your business. It is a bit like a marriage. You really have to learn to live with each other. You have to know an awful lot about people to want them in your business. Okay, any questions?
So Irene, you said you are a sole solicitor. Are you like a sole proprietor?
I'm the sole proprietor. Yeah. I employ 8 people, but I'm the sole proprietor.
So your law firm, is it a company limited or what?
No.
Oh, it's not. So you are liability is unlimited liability if you.
I have insurance.
Oh, you insure. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we have to. It's absolutely sort of legal requirement.
Need to do the MVT now.
Sorry.
She'll ask her accountant what she needs. We'll get good advice.
And on the contract one, to add the importance of looking at limitation of liability and IP protection. I was working with a small software business that contracted with a large corporate oil and gas business, and the liabilities were, if there was an event on an offshore rig, it was suggesting they were liable for lost production. They're a small software business, and they had to do some customization to the software, and it suggested that the IP then became the ownership of the other company. So initially, this small company was so excited to have a big contract with a big organization, they were going to skip over some of the contractual reviews, and then when we actually got into it, we found these things that would have just ruined them if they'd have gone through with it. So very keen to work with someone who understands that stuff and to get that reviewed properly.
Sorry. Sorry. I want to ask about the IP. So I know that there's the WIPO, and also UK have the UK one. So would you suggest someone, for example, like me, like I'm just a sole trader, or if someone who is going to establish a small company, then register with WIPO directly, or just the UK? Because if it's just within the UK, then someone from another country might copy it.
Yeah,
there's a risk.
You make that decision depending on the reach of your business. So if you're conducting business internationally, you need to protect your IP internationally.
So do I have to apply for it from the UK government first, and then select?
It depends where you operate. It depends what you're trying to protect and where you're trying to protect it. And there are some countries where there's frankly no point in trying to protect it.
Yeah.
There are a number of obvious ones. So the States will be one, which is probably the less obvious, but the States, they don't give a stuff. And China also. You'll just spend tons and tons of money fighting legal actions. Yeah.
Okay, so just there.
Do you have some rough numbers you can give us what it costs to protect our fee?
If you're doing it in the UK and you're registering your trademark, it costs a couple of £100.
I recently, I'm just waiting for the outcome. I recently went through one myself to trademark my limited company, and it was, yeah, like you said, it's they also go to online, the UK one where you can check if it conflicts with other existing trademarks. Like, I think it's around about, like it's 150 or something.
Yeah,
I can't remember. But
yeah. Another common mistake people make is they think because they've registered the company with the name on the company's house, so that's enough to protect the name. As I say, it just needs to be very slightly different. But a very slightly different means it's confusing with your name. So you really need to do those.
That's different from some method you've written, right? So that's the name, right?
Yes, that's the name.
Created something.
Yeah, that's that.
A way of doing something, and you've done it 3 or 4 times, it's really good.
Yeah.
People love it, and you've written it up.
Then you have to get a patent. That's it. Yeah, that's different. Yeah, that's different. That's very specialist area, which I don't do.
And don't forget, if you are creating something new that's an advance in science or technology, there is a research and development tax relief available for limited companies, but not for sole traders.
Aren't there grants in those areas as well that you can obtain?
There are some grants, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that all of us are actually members of a networking organisation, which is international. And we found that having people that you know, where you network with them, we're all in different networking groups, but we know each other, is a really good way of getting clients. Stephen spoke earlier about referrals. We were talking about, you know, everyone here on the panel is somebody that I know through networking, and it's actually strategic networking, because I know that these individuals have the skills. So if I ever have to ask anything, then I know who to go to. I have people who are on my phone that I can request. So how can you get to know people? Well, you've got LinkedIn. Make sure that that's up to date. And there are people out there who are way better than me that can help me to create my profile. That will depend on what I'm trying to deliver to my clients at any one time. The LinkedIn profile doesn't have to be the same for the entirety of your business, in terms of it doesn't have to be like the same for 10 years. You change it as you need to. When you look at things like posting online, there are people that can help you with that. Posting regularly and something of value, because actually now it's about the experience. It's not just somebody creates something on AI and they post it. Actually, what's the experience you've got? Many of you will think, oh, well, how can I start? You've got so much experience already. When you start posting, people will see the value and they will come to you. Going to groups and coming to events like the BCS. So we're all going to meet. The only reason I'm here today is because I came to this group, and luckily I came to one of the meetings and they said, would you like to? Well, this is another way. I know that people here will come and speak to me, hopefully, because I'd love to know more about your businesses and everyone here on the panel. And you've asked really good questions because you know that they're trusted individuals. So things like communities, you've got your own certification bodies. There are groups, join them and see how you can give back to them before you get, I mean, I know you've written a book on AI, so tell people about that, post it, and it means that we'll read it and we'll come and speak to you about it. That's actually how you get business. It's never just one channel. I mean, Stephen, you were talking about 10 by 10, but actually we found there's all of those. But start with going out to meet people. So if I think about everyone here, you know, I think about Irene. If I ever have a question, anything to do with contracts, I don't even have to think who I'm going to talk to, because we've built that relationship. I know her. And if there's anything that I can do, I know that she will come to me as well. So in terms of that, I would say join the networking events. Once a month, you've got Federation of Small Businesses, you've got your own professional communities. Go online, there are meetups, do those, come to the BCS events. We've got a really good one. I'm really interested in the one that's on the 21st about scaling the business, because now I want to rule the world. Now I've got the right people here. And you've got those. You've got the PMI, for example, for those of you in project management. But it would be good, because we're almost out of time, just to ask everyone here on the panel, what is it about how you guys get clients? What is the best place that you get clients from? And what is it that you're doing? Because you're all very successful, I know. So let's start with Irene.
Well, I figured out quite early on that the best way for me to get work was from other professionals, typically accountants, because most small, medium-sized businesses have to retain an accountant. And if they have an issue, the first person they'll go to is the professional in their life. So I've developed a relationship with accountants, including Liz, all over the place. Also foreign lawyers, we do quite a lot of international work. And I've got some reach in quite a lot of jurisdictions, but to maintain that, I can't go around hunting for clients. But well, I do, but the best relationships for me there are foreign lawyers, because again, if a client I do work in Azerbaijan, for instance, in Kazakhstan, if a client there has an issue, the first person they'll go to is their local lawyer. So I make sure that I have those relationships in place, and then I do lots of local networking as well.
Yes, so likewise, I do some networking, but I know who my target client is, but I don't market to my target client. I market to the people that introduce those clients. So like Irene says, so I look for referral partners who have a pool of clients that do need my services. So I'll market to them. But I think going back on your LinkedIn point, don't forget that not only have you got a corporate brand or a business brand, but you've also got a personal brand, and you can build both, and they can have different voices. So you use your LinkedIn personalities, you use your social media, get someone to do it for you if you haven't got time. I haven't got time to take lots of photos and things, but outsource some of it. Do outsource things. Don't try and do things all by yourself all the time, because you're not an expert in everything. Just concentrate on doing the things that you are best at.
I love the personal brand point. So that's very much going to be, that is so important. I think people buy people, and in a world full of AI, be authentic, be yourself, build relationships. Building relationships has been absolutely crucial, not just from a professional business growth standpoint, but a personal growth standpoint as well. I've learned so much about myself in the last 6 months. It's been insane, frankly. But I think for me that the key thing that I absolutely love about business is networking, for sure, and building great relationships with people, and that has grown my business exponentially over the last 6 months. So I'd say it's absolutely key.
Brilliant. Yeah, we call it a host beneficiary strategy, where a great accountant is ideal for me. They're working with lots of business owners who might be having some challenges in the coaching world, so that's a good one for me. The networking is fantastic, as always. Good, we're all connected through networking, and as Jessica was saying, the important about your own personal brand. So if I'm sure you all know Simon Sinek and about his why, everybody will talk about, what they do and how they do it. No one talks about why they do something. So understand what's your why. That can differentiate you. And it's a great little thing if you haven't seen that from Simon. But yeah, networking and this host beneficiary referrals is always a great way to get more business. So how about you, Pamela?
So yeah, networking. And I used to wait for people to call me, and they did, but I've decided no more. I must do more on LinkedIn and other things. But I love the networking part. It's just because I am able to help people that I know that might need help. Actually, that's what ends up happening, is that I've got lots of people who will want accountants or lawyers, and they need help. And I reached out to someone today who wanted some help with something, but I had a huge group of people that I could call upon. That was really great. So last but not least, this is the checklist. This is going to be sent out to everyone so that you can tick off the things that you want. But really, it just reminds me that it is great to do what you're doing. I love doing it. Sometimes it's a little bit scary, but there's no reason not to do it. If you decide there's something you want to do, and it's to run your own business and build a consultancy on something that you're passionate about, then actually it's going to succeed, because that's what you want to do. Get the right people in your team. So whether it's an accountant, it's a solicitor, whoever it might be, reach out and make that connection first. And all that's left to say is thank you very much to my great fellow panelists who've come along to help me out. So thank you very much, Stephen. have any questions, please reach out. Just so that you know that for those that are here, if you connect on LinkedIn, we're all happy, 15-20 minutes. If you need some guidance or something, please reach out. We're all happy to do that. We're not going to give out numbers because we don't want thousands of WhatsApp messages, but please reach out on LinkedIn. You can find us, and we'll also send out the presentation to you.
Perhaps we can publish the LinkedIn in the event.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much. And
Well,
thank you.